The Houston Texans' Cinderella run for the 2023 season has ended. It ended where it began back in September. Who would have thought after week one in M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore that we would be here in mid-January getting ready to sift through the aftermath of a playoff loss to the Ravens. So it ended where it began, but in between, man, what a magical ride this was this year. So much joy brought back to Houston Texans football. Unfortunately, it ended in a way today that was really not emblematic of what the Texans evolved into during the season. A very, very competitive, at times really good football team that could stand toe-to-toe with anybody. Today, they stood toe-to-toe with the Ravens for a half, and they lose 34-10 to the number one seeded Ravens. As we welcome you in to Texans postgame, the final Texans postgame of this 2023 season. Sean Pendergast alongside Clint Stoerner. Clint, you and I watched the entire game together, and we've been talking for a half hour now before this postgame. I'm having a really hard time mustering up any anger about what happened today with this Ravens game. Yeah. Just based on the team lined up across from the Texans, obviously a really talented football team with much more depth and better pieces than the Texans have right now. So I have a hard time mustering up any anger. We're going to dig into this game because there's certainly things from this game to dig into and turning points in this game where maybe it doesn't get out of hand in the second half for the Houston Texans. But the overall emotion I have here at the end of this whole thing is really, it's more about the last 19 weeks than it is the last 3.5 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree to a certain extent, but I do have a small bit of frustration. You know, this is a team that, while I understood there were, there were some struggles running the football. I understood going into this game, you're playing arguably the best team in all of football this season, and it was going to be a steep climb. But to have a game come down to you were given opportunities in the first half, multiple opportunities in the first half. The defense was playing great, and you set a franchise record for penalties in a playoff. The pre-snap penalty thing. And it's just, I think for me, like, I expected this team to come in and put their best foot forward. Would not have been surprised had that not been enough to get the W because, again, Baltimore was a team that I was tired of hearing about Friday. I was tired of hearing about the arrogance. I thought it was being over-discussed. Well, I tell you what, after watching that ball game, I was wrong. I mean, they were worth every bit of the hype, no doubt about it. But to think that the Texans in this ball game, after playing as well as they played really the last 2 weeks, to then come out and a big part of the story of why this wasn't a more competitive football game is because of the pre-snap penalties. And that is a very, very frustrating thing to me to see be a part of why this Texans team wasn't able to take a lead in the first half when given the opportunity, stay competitive in the second half down the stretch. That's a very frustrating aspect of it. Beyond that, I'm with you.
Yeah. No, the penalties were fairly ridiculous. I too, I think if I'm looking at this game and go, okay, I mean, ultimately this was a game where they had 213 yards of offense. So they had plenty of issues outside of the discipline issues pre-snap. I thought where the Texans might have been able to kind of make the Ravens feel like a little bit of game pressure was if they went into the locker room at halftime with a lead. I thought Ka'imi Fairbairn missing that field goal right before the half was kind of a gut punch to the Texans a little bit. You got a real good chance to go in. The defense has really stood up for you. They allowed the Ravens to score a field goal on their opening drive, and then the touchdown to put them up 10-3. And then for the rest of the first half, the defense was lights out. They forced 3 3-and-outs in a row on the Ravens, and they were getting in the backfield. D'Amico was blitzing like a madman. He was hitting that red blitz button like crazy throughout the day today, more than he ever has before in any game as a defensive coordinator or a head coach. But I thought the sequence of missing the field goal, ironically special teams, because special teams is the only thing that scored a touchdown for you today. But you missed the field goal, and then you come out, and the opening kickoff of the second half, Devin Duvernay takes it to midfield. And I thought that really kind of got the crowd going again, and it gave the Ravens a short field. And then they went touchdown after that. And then throughout the second half, it just looked like the Texans, it looked a lot like week one against the Ravens. Just the wheels fell off. A physically superior team really just kind of grinded you to dust. I'm 100% with you on the pre-snap stuff. And there were times in this game where D'Amico Ryans came really close to look like finally blowing a gasket on the sidelines. I thought that Jonathan Grenard offsides
yeah.
right before the end of the third quarter.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is going to be it. We're going to see an angry D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah.
And he was angry, you could tell, but he never lets the teapot fully explode or anything like that. I think an unfortunate way for the season to end. It's not emblematic at all of what this team has become this season.
Yeah, no, I agree. There is absolutely zero frustration or disappointment in what the Texans have done this year. I mean, they are so far ahead of the curve in terms of what I thought this rebuild was going to look like. Even once D'Amico got here, that it's tough to be disappointed with the overall season for the Texans. I'll tell you the other thing from this particular ball game, Sean, that's less of a frustrating issue and more of just something that I think came to a head in this game is the inability to run the football. And look, again, I understand that Baltimore is a really, really good defense. But the inability to run the football, I think, had a lot to do with the pace and the violence that you saw this Baltimore defensive front play with consistently throughout. Like when you can't run the football and they're able to just basically use 4 to stop your run and use 4 to rush the passer and then now they're dictating what you do in terms of do you have to throw hot, do you not? I mean, they really just were able to handcuff what the Texans could possibly do. And I'm not saying what they could call. I'm saying what they could ultimately get executed offensively, man. And I think a lot of that has to do with, boy, if you don't have any kind of run game, it's difficult to play with the big boys in this league.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this was a game, too, where probably not having Tank Dell really rears it.
Sure.
Like this is a Ravens team. You need to go in with every bullet, that you've got firing. Yeah. And this is, Tank is different, and he makes things easier on everybody. CJ, the other receivers, everybody. And not having him there, I thought this was one of those games where that kind of came back to roost a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You start to feel the losses that you had throughout the season of being down to Nico really being the only guy that you feel like can get you an explosive.
Yep.
And then Dalton Schultz has another drop. That's tough in a game like this right here to overcome. It's just the margin of error for the Texans going into this ball game was so slim that it is the little bitty things like the drop and the not challenging the spot on the second down that turned into a third and short, and they didn't get it on third and short. And, all those little bitty things when you're playing up such a steep hill versus a team like Baltimore, they absolutely do matter. I mean, you might want to sit back and look back, oh, why are you nitpicking this, nitpicking that? All of those little things lead to the game ultimately getting out of hand. And so, that's I don't know. This is a game that as I'm watching it, I'm like, man, this is the game where you have to have some semblance of a run game.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's your quarterback that's doing it, which obviously that CJ's not that build, or it's your tailback that's doing it, or your unique exotic type plays can get it done, but you got to have some way to take the pressure off of the offensive line and CJ Stroud, and you just didn't have that in the tank.
No, you didn't. You were in 2nd and 9 and 2nd and 10 and 2nd and 11 way too much today, as opposed to when the running game's been at its best, it's been really good. When the running game has been enough to beat good teams, it's at least getting you in 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, the occasional 2nd and 3, things like that. Couldn't get out of first gear today in that run game, and you're right, that came back to roost. And that's honestly, I'm guessing part of this post-game show too, and certainly a lot of what we're going to be doing this week on Sports Radio 610 is taking a look at what this team needs to do in the offseason to be able to compete with a team like the Ravens, to be able to make sure that teams like the Ravens actually have to come to NRG Stadium for a playoff game, as opposed to the Texans going, man, the AFC goes through all these damn cold weather cities. We got to plan to play in the cold. No, you got to go win 13 games.
Well,
that's the message.
Right, yeah. And the other thing, too, is for me, as a Texans fan, I'm watching that ball game, and I'm like, okay, this is what you're shooting for.
The Ravens.
The Ravens
That's
are
the gold standard.
Because McDonald is very similar relative to how he wants to play defense. He wants to play some zone. He wants to be able to pressure up front. He's got backers. It's very similar to what D'Amico Ryans wants to do. I don't know how attached they are, like schematically in their coaching tree and their coaching beliefs, but it's what you want it to look like, right? And that their ability – in those front four, look, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know that they have anybody in their front four from a pass rushing perspective that's more impressive than Jonathan Grenard and Will Anderson is going to be. Right? And that front four we just watched, I don't know if there's anybody in that front four that you go, I'll take that single guy over these guys you have. But as a whole, everybody they put in that front four, they were collapsing the pocket.
Yeah.
They were constantly pressuring C.J. Stroud. Never let C.J. get They never let C.J. get comfortable. I don't think C.J. had a sack. I don't think they had a sack.
No, they had the intentional grounding at one point. I don't know if that counts as a sack or not, but it functions like a sack.
I mean, they're able to create, like they do it from all four spots. They literally just collapse the pocket. The pocket is just really, really tight versus that Baltimore team. And I think ultimately, that's what D'Amico wants to get to as well. And so, you look at Baltimore and you're like, okay, that's the measuring stick. That's where you want to get to. From a talent perspective, from a scheme perspective, from the guys playing on one string, that's what you want to get to.